Hello, and welcome to this week's Letter to Past Self. On this week's Letter to Past Self, we're going to be talking about my feedback from my two game pitches to Liminal, and then setting up the scales of those two worlds, as well as getting ready for collaborators that may want to work on this project. So first off, let's talk about Liminal and how their response to the two pitch ideas that they had. They were very impressed with both ideas, but they felt that the water slide one could leave players feeling motion sickness because of the rapiding of changing speeds, and I and I understand that because that was the main thing in which I was always thinking about when I was designing that game was the control of was because of the fact of the speed of movement and change of colors. It could typically lead people to feel motion sickness if it's too immersive or just looking at it for too long. And for the Pinata Simulator, they really loved it and they felt that it can truly make an energizing experience. And that they should really particularly choose that idea, which is the one I did. Pinata Simulator was the game that I decided to continue on over Water Slide, mostly because I know this one will be a more energizing experience, and it's one that I would rather make more than the slide one because the slide one was kind of more complicated, but the pinata one was a lot easier to spit out code and I could do a lot more with it. For setting up the world scale, the first thing I did was is just go into Unity and grab a bunch of like the basic shapes so then I can get play around with some scales before I started putting in particular assets that I found either from Google Poly or made myself or Kirby make them. So the first thing I did was is make a cube and then put it as a barn and then make a tree which was three spheres and two cubes that have been stretched out. And then I placed the camera in the middle. I also put a plane on the floor so that we could test to see the floor based with the height. When we were first testing this area with the basic with this basic view, we felt that the tree was really tall and that it needed to be scaled down, and as well as with the but the barn itself was really good, and same with the floor. So that was really good. So after I did that, I decided to find as many poly assets that I could so that I could easily just spit them into the game and uh, decide if I wanted to keep them or just to keep adding to the environment because I wanted for this game to be let me put in as much as I can so then I'm not left empty. Because it's kind of what I do with other games that I've been making. For this one, I wanted to put as much as I can. So when we were testing to environment to see if it was giving the right energy back, because a lot of the things about the Pinata one to make it more energizing with the visuals is for that strong sense of color palette. So I had to figure out if those color palettes and those Google Poly assets that I found were working nicely with each other, and they were. So yeah, in class, I decided to find assets to use for the game. A lot of these being bond, fence purses, corn, a halo for like for a cemetery, like you saw a branch so that it swings around the entire player, so it didn't look like it was floating in the space, as well as um, as well as a nice big old bond that isn't a cube and stuff. And like once all of that was in there, I made different materials to put on them as well as the materials that was given with them from Google Poly and just altered the colors so that they went from white, like the default white, to a more orange tone so that it looked a lot nicer. And after doing that, I then tested scales to see if everything was all right within the things. I found that the branch that I had, which was a halo, was a little too wide, but as well as the tree was still a little bit too big. But all of the other environmental things were very nice. They fit very well into the scene and they made it look a lot better. It gave me that feel. The other thing that I was doing as well as testing for the right energy was making sure I made the correct skybox because I was using procedural and procedural is really uh, finicky on how it wants to work. And for the sky, I decided to try and make the ground like a brownish orange, and then the sky as lightest peaches orange that I could get. And I got that nice feel, but I also wanted to try to see if I could make an extreme like sunburny one, so that I could get that intense. I could see if I could get a more intense thing to like make the player feel a little bit more intense. But I did that and it made the greens, it made all the blues go green. So I decided that I couldn't really use that one, so we went for the more softer one and it still works perfectly fine. Hmm. Yeah. So it was just more or less changing as Mling said. After I did most of that, I then set up an asset list, and this was to help me. This was both to help myself and help the help anyone who wanted to help work on the project. Because what I did was is I wrote a full-on list of every single audio and birth visual assets that I need. For the visual assets, it was more like barn filled with corns, fence posts, gates, pinatas to use as prefabs before they get made, what percentage of them being destroyed, and all these kinds of things, so then I could best articulate all those types of things. So yeah, the order one was the one that I need to get the figure out the most because I got a message of someone who wanted to work with audio with me. So that was as well as thinking of every single little thing that I could that the player could either interact or hear. I knew that this game, because of the Go, was not going to use a lot of ambience because how the Go works, it doesn't really allow you to do 3D specting in things, as well as the place that you were in and the type of music that was playing, you wouldn't really hear it. So I wasn't too focused on like tree like rustling and all that kind of stuff. The things that I was more focused on was making sure that the soundtrack of that party dancing feel was hit and describing it for those different modes and how they were implemented, as well as different things the players will hit. So like the player hitting the pinata, the player hitting the ground, the player hitting the branch, the rope being pulled and tugged, the the different the different celebrational noises, like when you complete something, when something is destroyed, and all these kinds of things. The reason why I wanted to do this was because last time I worked with collaborators, I kept changing the asset Bible and wasn't really up to date on it until like maybe fifth week in on the project. So this time I really wanted to settle down those assets because I can and I should because last time I felt that I was unable to communicate effectively on all the things that I wanted in the game and had to consistently add more work to my collaborators where I felt that they shouldn't have. They should have known what their expected work was instead of halfway through the project, oh, you know all that stuff you did? That's great. You need to do 20 times more. I didn't want to do that again, and I didn't. I wanted to like lay it all out, and this time I did, and it worked a lot better this time because I was able to communicate to my audio student Justin exactly what he wanted to add to the project as well as what I was requiring from the project, and it worked really well. That's more or less what happened this week. Otherwise, I'll be more or less thinking about my mobile project and specialization. For my specialization, I was thinking more around level design and narrative, but now leaning towards more of UX because UX is a lot more transferable. But that's it for this week, and thank you for listening.